A friend messaged me the other day to discuss crypto. Remind me, wasn't crypto supposed to be a replacement currency? He writes, well, no, it's not. It's going to be a diversifying asset. Well, no, it hasn't been. And now we know it's not going to be an inflation hedge either. I'm not totally out, but I'm not convinced it serves a huge purpose. The biggest issue I have is that it doesn't produce anything. There's no cash flow. Explain why you are bullish. And as I'm sure many people out there are asking themselves similar questions, I'll be addressing this and more right about now. First of all, I don't care a darn about the altcoins, only Bitcoin. Why? Because it is by far the strongest of all the crypto assets. And similar to when I foresaw Google being the world's dominant search engine with 90% market share today, I'm not going to waste your time or mine trying to figure out which coin is going to be Bing. So the question, why Bitcoin? One, decentralization. It is one of very few crypto assets that is entirely decentralized, and the others are Bitcoin forks like Bitcoin Cash. So what does it mean to be decentralized? It means no individual or group controls it. Conversely, if I were to desire to take over the Ethereum protocol, I can put a gun to the head of its creator, Vitalik Buterin, and a few others, and be fairly certain that they'll comply with my instructions. Klaus Schwab and the commies realize this, which is why Bitcoin is so problematic for them, as there is no individual or group to coerce or to kill. It's like a Chinese-made virus released into the world that cannot be eradicated. Fortunately, in this case, it is inoculating the world against the totalitarian control of the elites, a subject that I'll be addressing soon to come. The network effect. The more people that come into the Bitcoin space, the more developers derive benefits, making it more robust and easier to use, which in turn generates a greater number of users, and like a snowball rolling downhill in a virtuous cycle, the protocol gains momentum and continues to expand its gravitational force. The larger the network grows, the more valuable it becomes. It's called a network effect, and with hundreds of millions of souls around the world having either used Bitcoin as a payment method, or perhaps they own some, gravitational pull has grown exponentially over the years for Bitcoin. The talent pool. For many, including myself, Bitcoin is thought of as the life raft of freedom. And people, for example, Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, a billionaire, has made it his life's mission to expand the reach and the viability of Bitcoin. Money is not the incentive, it's the conviction that they are benefiting mankind unlike any other pursuit that they could choose. Anti-fragility is a protocol that is unlikely to be changed, though Lord knows that the powers that be have been trying. From the block wars, which were waged from the summer of 2015 to the fall of 2017, to China banning mining of Bitcoin within its borders, to the ESG cudgel of today. Bitcoin has weathered these and other storms, making it increasingly anti-fragile, a term that was coined by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. That means the more adversity a business or an idea faces and has overcome, the stronger and more resilient it becomes, and the more likely it is to continue to exist into the future. So, what exactly does Bitcoin produce? If in 1990 I told you that getting letters in the mail would be entirely replaced by a digital messaging technology, cost next to nothing, and would arrive instantaneously, would you not have the foresight to agree that email would bring tremendous amounts of productivity growth to the planet? Similarly, Bitcoin is on the precipice of obliterating snail mail Western Union from the world. My maid in Los Angeles would send money home to her family in El Salvador, and the total cost from send fees, currency exchange, gas and transportation costs, paying off the gangs for the right to enter the Western Union office to receive their cash, end up costing poor Blanca, my maid, up to 30 or 40% of her meager earnings, all going to the middlemen. A charge administered to some of the poorest people on the planet. Today, Bitcoin and the Layer 2 Lightning Network built atop it with a click of a button on a $50 mobile phone instantaneously and nearly for free acts as the remittance system. Now, those of us fortunate enough to be US citizens have American privilege. I mean, we can zap the current world reserve currency, the US dollars, to our friends, to other lands for low costs. Only a small percentage of people existing on this planet have this luxury available to them. The rest pay incredibly high fees, like my maid Blanca. That is, if they are able to transact with other countries at all. Bitcoin levels the playing field, and using the aforementioned Layer 2 Lightning Network, most people are completely oblivious that they are in fact using Bitcoin rails to send the money. You cannot possibly argue that this does not make the world a much better place, unless of course you are the CEO of Western Union. MasterCard and Visa fees. Whenever you swipe your Visa or MasterCard, the merchant gets charged about 3% of the transaction. And if you happen to be a coffee shop in Costa Rica, where I lived until recently, the 7% fee is reflected in the vastly higher prices that exist there. To be fair, credit cards have certainly provided a benefit to society. The user, for example, doesn't have to carry around his paycheck in cash, which, if known, would soon lead to a mugging. Similarly, the merchant doesn't have to take the time, the expense, and risk of moving around large chunks of currency. Plus, there's the convenience and the speed of the transaction. On the downside, a lot of people end up paying 30% interest on the loan, making them de facto slaves to the bank. And the merchant doesn't even get the cash in their bank account for well over a month after the transaction has taken place. Now say you're McDonald's in El Salvador. The government has legalized Bitcoin, and using the Lightning Network, the cost of each transaction for the merchant is reduced to fractions of a penny. And that money is added to your account instantly. Meanwhile, your profits, and remember, we're talking about fast food, a notoriously low margin business, expand dramatically. No matter what country your business resides in, wouldn't you prefer to be paid via this method? Would you not offer some form of incentive to induce this form of payment? You have the added margin to do so, after all. And if you and other merchants do what is in your best interest, would this not speed up Bitcoin's adoption? Similarly, for the Salvadorian citizen, a country that prior to the introduction of Bitcoin as a legal currency had 70% of its citizens unbanked. The Bitcoin wallet on their phone marks the first time they've been able to conduct business without carrying around cash. Now today, guess what? We get to flip those account numbers, because 70% of Salvadorians are banked today, with a mobile phone acting as both the vault and the ATM. How can a technology that benefits both parties to this extent not catch on like a virus? How in the world do you propose to stop it with the incentives offered on both sides of the transaction? There still might be a case to use centralized credit card processors if you want certain consumer protections, but for most daily transactions, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network are going to take a giant and serious bite out of Visa's business model, an inviolable store of wealth. He who controls the gold controls the world. Many kings and nation states have taken this aphorism to heart and made the plunder of the precious metal part of the game theoretical calculation when deciding to invade another sovereign, knowing that they could use the seized asset to pay the cost of the war, or perhaps for their own hedonistic spending. With Bitcoin, there is nothing to seize. And in the unlikely event that I fear that you might find a way to gain access to my private key, I can zap the coin to anywhere on the planet in a millisecond. Doesn't this change war's calculus? Now let's take a look at this phenomenon from a higher resolution down to the level of the individual. If I store my wealth in cash or a Rolex watch that I carry around on my wrist, you can hold a gun to my head, and if I don't comply, merely pull the trigger and take what was once mine. If I have my Bitcoin stored on a hard drive, or better yet, in a multi-sig system, you shoot me and you walk away with Zippo because the keys die with me. Bitcoin reduces the incentive for real world violence. Sure, you say, but modern banking is just done with zeros and ones. The days of the plunder of the nation states has ended. And as for me individually, I'm completely secure because I have my money parked at the Bank of Montreal. As for the plunder of sovereign countries for their wealth, they are still invaded physically for often natural resources like oil, but it's increasingly coming in the form of cyber attacks, whether for technological secrets, hello China, ransomware, or draining funds from institutions that are asleep at the wheel. As for your current wealth, you don't own it. The state is merely nice enough to allow you to access it, so long as you are a good little boy or girl. Take Canada, which froze the accounts of those not only who participated in the Freedom Convoy, who were protesting the draconian and authoritarian vaccine mandates, but of anybody who dared to have the audacity to donate to them. I emptied every single dime in my Canadian bank account as quickly as I could. They are flat out openly letting you know Trudeau and his commie allies are coming for you and your property rights. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I point this out to some Canadians and get mocked as a conspiracy theorist and then arrogantly preached to by those who claim that since they weren't the ones stopping traffic in Ottawa, that they have nothing to fear. These brilliant thinkers don't understand that if somebody with a political ideology opposite to theirs grabs the reins of the government, that they could easily use this precedent set and seize the funds of others for merely donating to the opposition, or the indiscretion of holding views that they find unacceptable.
Of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views.
The BLM Antifa riots of 2020 lasted far longer, killed people, and did billions of dollars worth of property damage. Even despite the vastly disproportionate destructive force compared to the Freedom Convoy, these morons would be singing a completely different tune if Donald Trump had frozen or seized the assets, their assets, for donating $25 to BLM. Good news, though, for your property rights. That is, if you own Bitcoin. Combating state seizures and cyber theft is the incentive structure designed into the Bitcoin protocol. If you and I are miners, we are competing using real world electricity to reap the block reward, which is doled out every 10 minutes. In doing so, we are both increasing the cost to a third party who wants to hijack the system. That means even if we are sworn enemies, be that Iran and Israel, Yankees and Red Sox, or Elizabeth Warren and honesty, it's a forced synergy. I work in my best interest, you work in yours. And in doing so, we are working together to protect the wealth of everybody who owns Bitcoin from a cyber attack. That means that unlike cash, the Rolex watch, or gold, so long as you don't keep your Bitcoin on a centralized exchange like Coinbase, it's virtually impossible to steal your wealth from you. Try as they might, neither Trudeau, Donald Trump, or the King of China can gain access to your private wallet. Furthermore, your wealth is transportable. Think of trying to move $1 million worth of gold across borders. Even if you are strong enough to lift it off the ground, you're not getting through security checkpoints, or if you do, past any armed gangs. Think of some of the German Jews as Hitler rose to power, who might have even read Mein Kampf and overrode their intuition that things would never get as bad as the state systematically exterminating them. Why would they fool themselves? In part because they didn't want to leave their house behind, their currency, and all of value that they had accumulated over a lifetime. Or maybe they did flee and leave everything behind, and they fled to America and they had to start all over again from scratch. Present day, it's difficult to move your Los Angeles house to South America if Gavin Newsom decides to tax it at 50% per year. But your Bitcoin, walk on a plane with your seed phrase memorized, and you don't even need a hard drive. Just reconstitute it when you arrive in Colombia. The same thing is going on in Ukraine today, as millions of the country's citizens have fled to Poland and other nearby countries. All the possessions that they left behind, their house, that which they could not carry on their backs that was of value, might not be there when they return, if they are ever able to do so. With Bitcoin, many of them were able to transport their wealth with them on their phones. Not only is Bitcoin, if stored securely, an inviolable asset, you get to take it with you no matter where in the world you go. It yields no cash flow. My friends claim that the asset produces no cash flow is categorically false. You can already lend out your Bitcoin, for example, as collateral for somebody else's loan and earn yield. It's not something that I'm willing to do, as the earnings, in my opinion, don't justify the risk, clearly demonstrated from those who put up coins on Celsius or into the Terra Luna protocol, which have since imploded. But you can still, if you desire to, earn a yield on the asset today. However, as Bitcoin infrastructure develops, so too will the opportunities to earn cash flow from your HODL. Bitcoin as an inflation hedge. When the airplane was invented, few saw it making any difference in any war. None other than Nobel Prize winning economist and frequent New York Times columnist, so you know the quality that they get, Paul Krugman, predicted that the internet would create no more value for society than the fax machine. If you predicted in 1988 that your giant brick of a cell phone would be speaking to you, navigating you on a road trip across the country while you listen to Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life on Audible, blaring from it via Bluetooth speakers to your ears directly. Bitcoin does everything that gold does as a store of value and everything else, except it does it 1,000 times better. For example, Bitcoin, it is infinitely divisible to 100 million Satoshis, and you can move that decimal over to the right if you were to desire to. It's able to be sent at the speed of light to anybody in the world for fractions of a penny. It's completely weightless, and the actual supply of Bitcoin is fixed, whereas gold continues to be mined. And who knows if alchemists will ever develop a technique where they could recreate gold in a laboratory. You can print the US dollar to infinitum, which is exactly what the Biden administration is doing. But you cannot print or create any more Bitcoin than that which continues to be programmatically released in the form of the block rewards. And yes, right now, as the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, liquidity is being drained out of the system, and crypto assets, including Bitcoin, which used to suck up the extra liquidity like a sponge, are getting wrung out. But over the long run, the reserve store of value will revert to an asset that cannot be controlled by a central authority and not be debased by the printing press. The US dollar has the waning might of the growing woke US military backing it. Bitcoin has math on its side. Which of these two will still be relevant in 1,000 years? Again, just because a new technology doesn't fulfill its potential in its initial stages, just wait and allow the gravitational forces behind it to play out. Even if fiat money, like the US dollar, is not entirely supplanted by Bitcoin, there is a solid chance that Bitcoin will become a reserve asset for central banks around the world to store within their vaults. So for all these reasons and more, I am very bullish on Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin because it is a life raft away from Chinese and Canadian totalitarianism. I love it because it opens up the ability for Africans, Salvadorians, Southeast Asians to actually have a store of wealth without the government being able to seize it. I love it because of its beautiful and tested design and proven anti-fragility. I love Bitcoin because it might put a check on the violence and the spending of modern day governments, and its incentives induce cooperation between adversarial entities to ensure the security of everyone's wealth. And I'm grateful that it is a store of wealth that can be transported across the borders of Ukraine, Syria, or Canada when democracies there come under attack. Be patient and let the beauty of the design and the viral aspect of Bitcoin infect and better the world. Guys, let me know your thoughts below. Please thumb up the video, share it with a friend. I think this is valuable, and subscribe, hit the all notification bell if you do. Have a great day and keep stacking sats. These are just my opinions, not meant as financial advice. Peace and blessings, everybody.